This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Good evening, everyone. This is the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Peter. It is Tuesday, May 26, 2020. It is 7 o'clock p.m., and this is a virtual meeting only. We'll call to order. We have already done the roll call, so the next thing, would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we have the agenda. Everyone should have a copy of the agenda. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
Okay, Ed 1, Shannon 2, all in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, we have minutes. First, we have the minutes from our May 11th, 2020 regular meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 5 through 8. Are there any changes, corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Carrie Johnson will make that motion.
Emily Bruflett will second.
Okay, Carrie 1, Emily 2, all in favor of the May 11th, 2020 meeting minutes approval as written, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we have the minutes from our May 19th, 2020 Board of Appeal and Equalization meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 9 and 10. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? Hearing no one, I do have one, and maybe it's been changed. Barb, on page 9, it says April 23rd, 2019 minutes, which should be the date of May 19th that it appears on our agenda.
Yep, I apologize for that. I didn't catch it before the packet went out, but it's been corrected.
Okay, all right. Since that's been corrected, I guess we don't need to make that change then. Everyone in favor of those minutes with that change, I guess, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we will address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? Hearing or seeing no one?
Mr. Mayor, I'm reviewing the on-screen. Yeah,
Okay.
I see no one, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, seeing no one. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? And I know that we have Mr. Logger here joining us. Todd, is there anyone else that you see in that regard?
No, sir. No, sir, I don't see anyone else. Mr. Logger is the only one that I'm aware of via the virtual meeting.
Okay. Scott, here's, I kind of told you in the email what we do. We'll allow you 5 minutes to present what you wanted to speak to the council about. The council, if they wish, can ask you some questions after you're done. Otherwise, we will, go from there. Take under advisement what you're presenting to us tonight. Go ahead, Scott.
Name and address, please.
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought I had it written down here. We need your address, name and address, Scott.
Okay. Yeah, Scott Logger, and my address is 560 North Welco Drive, St. Peter.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead and I know we've exchanged a couple of emails, but go ahead and present to the rest of the council what you want to talk to us about tonight. Thank you.
Okay. You moving me up? Okay.
Yep.
Well, this is about the COVID shutdown in our state and my concern for the city. So I'll read on. Am Lake passed a resolution number 2013 constitutional and business friendly community resolution on May 18th with a 5-0 vote. I forwarded this this resolution to the mayor for council's review. I don't know if you have it. Carrie Johnson, I sent it to her as well. It was kind of late. The action expresses opposition to the governor's emergency executive order 2033, noting restrictions to the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which states, "No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person with its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." The town of Evelyn, Minnesota acted similarly on May 20th. Neither city will enforce the governor's restrictions. I don't know if you have, I would ask that you walk the streets and survey your local business owners. I have. They have furloughed employees at the establishments I talk to. The prolonged actions of our government with this shutdown is shameful. The social distancing and mask recommendations are not followed or enforced in the state currently. Saturday, I was in Menards and witnessed a gentleman walking out without a mask. The posted rules as you walk into Menards state, you must have a mask to shop the store. Obviously, this isn't being enforced. Neither is a social distancing. Have any of you seen the video of the opening day at the Yellow Barn? The line waiting to get into the door was literally back pocket to front zipper of the next person in line. They were 1 to 2 feet from one another. I trust our local business friends and neighbors to take care of the local citizens over these chain stores we're forced to shop in Mankato and elsewhere. When I look at the City of St. Peter website, I see City Council list of items of vital importance. The 4th bullet point, thriving and sustainable business community. 8th lists improve sustainability with a sub bullet point for city business. It's time to demonstrate your commitment to our business community and give them an opportunity to reopen. This would be each business's individual choice. My point is that St. Peter need not be the reason that these businesses fail. I believe that everyone was on board with the initial national and state shutdowns. What's missing are the lessons that we learned and the actions matching and adapting to these lessons. I ask that the wisdom of our St. Peter elected officials will prevail over blanketed, broad rules applied statewide, disproportionate to the threat that we see. The St. Peter does not need to be this contributor to the failure of business. And I'd like to reference some statistics for you quickly. The total cases as of this last Saturday in Minnesota were 19,485. Deaths 852. Hennepin County, over 5,400 of these cases were theirs. 467 of the deaths were theirs. Nicollet County, we've had a total of 39 cases, which is equivalent to 0.00099% of the total population within the county itself. We've had 3 deaths. That's 0.00076% of our total population in this county. 56 counties in Minnesota have no deaths. 5 counties have no cases whatsoever. A one-size-fits-all shutdown does not work for Minnesota. It certainly does not work for St. Peter. That's all I have.
You were right on 5 minutes though, too there, Scott. Good job. We're going to first open it up. I'm not going to go around. If anybody has a question or comment for Scott before we move on to our regular or our new business, please ask now. And like I say, I'm not going to go around. Just go right ahead.
Hi, this is Emily. I have a question for Scott.
Yeah.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for speaking tonight. My question is just for clarification for you. Are you concerned that businesses such as Menards are not enforcing the mask and the social distancing, or the candy stores? Is that one of your concerns, or I wasn't quite understanding that example?
I would have 2 points to that. I would trust our small businesses to do a better job in enforcing social distancing because they're friends and neighbors. But as part-time workers, people who don't know one another, they're not going to push that too hard, and they are not. The other point that I have is the more businesses that are open, the less traffic you have going through. Hy-Vee is the worst store I've seen. People on top of one another going through the same checkouts. If that isn't a petri dish for everybody to be participating in, you're kidding yourself.
Thank you.
Does that
for
answer?
your-
Okay, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I think so. Thank you. No further
All right.
questions.
Anybody else have any other questions for Scott while we have him here?
I have a quick question. This is Carrie Johnson. Hi, Scott, and thanks for your emails over the last couple days and the one you just sent me real recently. Some of the statistics that you had reported in terms of the amount of cases in Nicollet County and deaths, when did you receive that information, or when did you look up that information, and where from?
That was off of a state website, and it was information was dated the 23rd of May, Saturday.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious just because I had heard that those numbers had increased just in the last couple of days. So thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Scott, I know that you and I haven't talked. We've exchanged emails, and some of the things I never understood about all of this either was how can you have stores or places open like you had mentioned. Menards now does. I've been there a few times, and they do enforce the mask when you're going into the building. Once you leave the building, they don't have any control over anybody evidently. But I haven't seen anything. I've seen people being stopped, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. What I never quite understood, and I was over at Menards about a month ago, before any of this, not any of it started, but it was going on pretty strong, and you couldn't hardly move in the store, like you say, like in Hy-Vee's. And that's the part that's always bewildered me was, a store in town here that may have 10, 15 customers a day, they can't do a better job than a place like that has hundreds of people jammed into it. So I agree with you. The problem that I have, or not a problem, but the thing that I've seen is they're a bar owner up toward St. Cloud, Albany, in that area. He has 6 bars, and he was going to open them up. Well, these businesses that have require state licenses, like a state liquor license, he got threatened with a $25,000 a day fine, by the state. So even if we would pass something like this, which I have no problem, doing, it's still up to the individual business owners as to the risk they want to take.
Yeah, I understand, Mayor. I opened up making a statement that would be each business's choice to make.
Yeah, you kind of broke up there, but I think I understand what you're getting at. So that's not a concern I have, but it's a question I have, because you say we can make all the changes or rules or things like that. Todd, I'm going to ask you a question. I know there's been, Scott referred to Ham Lake, and in one of the emails he referred to Eveleth with me. Are there other communities that have done this type of resolution?
Mr. Mayor, I believe that there are a few others. I can't list them all off for you right now, but certainly we could accomplish that research. But I think there are more than 2 that have taken similar type action.
Yeah, okay. And I was just kind of curious what kind of results they had from it. Like I say, we can pass things like this, but I don't know if businesses are opening anyway. That was kind of my point on that question.
Yeah, if you or the council would like us to do a little bit more research on that, we certainly can attempt to do that. I think it might be very, very hit and miss, and maybe working through Chamber of Commerce or someone like that might be able to provide us some additional information.
Yeah, I didn't talk to him. Todd, have you, or Scott, have you talked to Ed Lee at the chamber about any of this at all?
I haven't talked to Ed, and I'm not trying to criticize. I'm absolutely flabbergasted that the State Chamber of Commerce or the National Chamber of Commerce isn't getting more boisterous on this.
Yeah. Well, there's other reasons for that. But anyway, before we let you go, Scott, we're not going to do what we will do, and who knows what's going to happen a week. We are not going to take up this resolution or a change like this tonight. We will set it aside for our next meeting, which is next Monday, the 1st, and we will, do more, not questioning, but more discussion on it then, before we move forward. Because some people, and like I say, I didn't know if it was appropriate. I didn't want to start a chain appropriate to pass on your letter to everybody or your emails.
If you could share that with the rest of the council when you have discussion, that'd be great.
I will do that. And Carrie, I think, already has them. Before we let Scott go, is there anyone else that has any more questions for him? If not, Scott, we appreciate your concern. I know you're not alone. Like I say, a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense to a lot of people, and like I say, the yellow barn candy store thing. Show me how that's an essential business. I just never got it. So anyway, with that, Scott, we thank you for your time. We will. I'll have Todd put this on our workshop meeting next week. So in that time, the rest of the council members, I'll pass this information on, and they can do some research themselves on this.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Scott.
It would show future businesses that St. Peter Council is someone, or St. Peter is a place you'd like to do business at if they're watching for you.
Yeah. No, I understand that, and that's a good point of it. I didn't check. And I know we kind of a little bit back and forth on this issue too. We have provided interest-free loans spread out for quite some time, which I'm not sure some of these other communities have the availability to do that. So that is something, I guess we are doing something. Businesses realize that, but doesn't mean we can't always do more. So.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Todd, do you have anybody else that has joined us for general visitor comments?
No, Mr. Mayor, I do not see anyone else on.
Okay. All right. With that, we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 11 and concludes with the resolution on pages 29 and 30. And I'm almost there. And includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $10,000 to Eaton. For water node with Itron connectors for $49,980, excuse me. B&B commercial coating for sandblast and repaint 100 fire hydrants for $10,500. To Wesco for 7,500 feet of 4-aught 15 kilovolt primary electric wire for $16,035. We have a bunch of liquor licenses. The dates are all the same on these, July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2021. And for on-sale liquor, to the American Legion, to El Agave, Gustavus, and Redmond Club. For Sunday liquor, American Legion, El Agave, Gustavus, and the Redmond Club. For on-sale, MGM and the Market and Wine Spirits. For wine, Extra Paninos and Pizza, and also Jake's Pizza. For 3-2 off-sale beer, to Quick Trip, and to Family Fresh, and to Freedom Value. 3-2 on-sale beer. I guess the other one was off-sale. 3-2 on-sale beer, to Extra Paninos and Jake's Pizza. And we also have a tree worker license to Roots and Up Tree Service for May 27th, 2020 to April 30th, 2021. The fire department has some items that are going to be disposed of. They are either non-compliant, damaged, or have been replaced. There are 8 items listed there, plus the regular schedule of disbursements for May 7th, 2020 through May 20th, 2020. Are there any questions or comments concerning the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, this is Shannon. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
I was wondering on page 12, the fire hydrant painting just kind of jumped out at me, the difference between the 2 bids. The R&H painting was more than twice as much. Was there a difference? Were they offering more in terms of service, or is it the identical job and they are just bidding much, much higher for it?
Pete, are you there?
I am. We've worked with both companies on a variety of different things. R&H Painting does a lot of our manhole lining, and they do offer painting of hydrants as a additional service. They aren't as competitive as B&B. B&B does a lot of our transformers, a lot of our ground mount switches, and they do a lot of sandblasting on the ground. So they're probably one of the more reliable contractors going forward. Both are very good at what they do. It's just one does it a little better and maximizes its effort towards hydrants and transformers.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that is a great answer to that question. Now I have to remember what my second question was. Ed might actually be able to answer question number 2. On 15, with the surplus of the property from the fire department, is most of that just need to be disposed of? It has no value, or will any of it be sold or donated?
Mr. Mayor, let me answer that one because Ed's function tonight is as a city council member, not as a firefighter. So let me help him out a little bit. Most of that is being disposed of. However, as we discussed when you purchased new SCBA equipment, there is some of it that does have some value. And so we've solicited from local smaller fire departments that still have systems that might match with that. And so some of the canisters will be sold to some smaller, more local fire departments like Nicollet, and I believe Cortland might take a couple as well.
Oh,
Does that answer your question, Shannon?
yes, thank you.
All right. Say, Ed, from now on, can you probably not dress for the meetings in your turnout gear so we don't get confused? Are there any questions?
I have my turnout gear on.
Are there any other questions concerning or comments concerning the consent agenda? Just go ahead if anybody has one.
This is Carrie Johnson, Mr. Mayor. I have a question. On the council bill list, there over the past several meetings, there have been refunds issued for reservations. And Todd, I was just wondering, are we still booking out reservations without having a open date for the community center? Are we booking reservations for the park shelters?
If we have inquiries, we are taking bookings, but making sure to alert folks that that doesn't mean they will necessarily be available depending on governor's orders and rules of the city council. So we are trying very diligently to make people aware of that. But your assessment of the bill list is correct. We are doing that. I don't have the ones that you were talking about right in front of me, but we are also doing refunds for some of the programming that's going on. You've seen that over the last couple of meetings as well.
Is there a full refund given if they have to cancel their event when they've booked a room? Do they get a full refund for the room reservation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
All right. Anybody else have any questions? Hearing none. The resolution approving the consent agenda appears on pages 29 and 30. Is there a motion for approval?
Steve Graham, move the consent agenda, Mr. Mayor.
Ed will second it.
All right. Steve 1, Ed 2. Again, I'll ask one more time. Any more questions or comments concerning the consent agenda? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Next, we will move on to unfinished business, which we have none, so we will go right to new business. And the first thing up is the class of 2020 parade request. Todd.
Mayor, members, I've been working with the class of 2020 parent committee. Emily Soderlund is the chairperson of that committee. And so they provided information related to a parade request. We have, honestly, folks, I have steered this a lot because of the uncertainty surrounding COVID. And so the items that you see contained in the resolution, but also the bullet points on page 31 and 32, which again are reiterated as a part of the resolution, are from three primary sources. The first of which is the rules that you already have in place for parades or activities of this type. An example of that would be the level of insurance that you require. Also, guidance from the Minnesota Department of Education, who has put rules on school districts and other educational institutions relative to COVID in trying to ensure safety, distancing, etc. And the third of which is from the Minnesota Department of Health. And so some of those I list out there in particular where things are at. Some of the other items that you see you might not typically recognize as being part of a request or a requirement as a part of a parade, but let me explain one specifically that might give you an idea of the flavor or the feel of that. So as an example, they are required to have registrants for this parade. Since this is a intended reverse parade where the high school seniors would sit on the side of the roadway and people who want to wish well would drive from south to north, again from south to north on County Road 20/Nicollet Avenue. And so that would be north of Traverse up to the north end of of County Road 15 would be the termination point. An example of that would be they have to have registration. Now you might not see that with the 4th of July parade as a part of the request, but that does go on as a part of the 4th of July parade. Part of my rationale in really pushing that with this group is because this is all new and we have no idea what the order of magnitude of utilization or participation might be. And so to help organize the parade, to help ensure that we have appropriate distance, to help ensure we have enough roadway to make this sustainable and not curve around a corner onto Broadway or out onto Highway 22 or something like that, having registered participation seemed of value. So that's just to give you a feel of this. They have met all the requirements and are prepared to meet all the requirements. The parade would be on Thursday night for approximately an hour, starting at 7:30. The city would provide barricades and emergency vehicles at both the start and the finish of the parade, and the organizers are required to provide some volunteers to help register people, make sure people understand the rules, etc. There's a map included on page 33 of your packet, and the resolution starts on page 34 of your packet. And Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to stand for any questions and do my best to answer those during this very unusual time.
All right. We will start with questions. And Steve, go ahead if you have any questions.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Emily?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a lot of questions, actually. So, first of all, I am curious, Todd, was this from your perspective, is this a parent requested parade or did the students have anything to do with this?
My contact has solely been with the parent group, so I can't speak to the genesis or the origin of this. But I have spoken with this parent group, primarily the chairperson, Emily Soderlund.
Okay. So from my perspective, when I was reading through this, it seems like very late notice. And I was wondering if we know if anyone is really excited about this. From my perspective, all of these restrictions make it seem to me like it wouldn't be worth the effort. And so I I'm curious if there have been feelers put out for, community or the class of 2020 enthusiasm about something like this.
Let me break that point or question down into two subsets. The first of which is last, which is excitement. I can tell you as of this afternoon, they had 50 seniors register. I expect that to continue for a day or two more. These are certainly all busy families and busy folks, and so I expect over the next couple of days they'll have a few more, or maybe many more folks that register for this. So I don't know that I can speak exactly to the excitement, but maybe the numbers provide you information. An order of magnitude is that there's approximately 180 students in that senior class. The timeline in the late request is, I think, partially the organizing committee's challenge and frankly, partially my challenge in working back and forth with them. Past councils have instructed me to try and find ways to say yes to groups that want to provide for activities and events. And so there's been a lot of back and forth relative to trying to ensure that the guidelines from Minnesota Department of Education, Minnesota Department of Health, their rules and your rules are met by this group. And so that's part of the late timeline in that it's a volunteer group and it takes some time to get these things together. I am not worried as the city administrator about our ability to control the roadway, provide for barricades, have emergency vehicles. We have good internal communication, so I'm not worried that a couple of days notice means that we just can't make it happen. I think it can happen readily based on the staff discussion that we've had so far.
Thank you for that clarification, Todd. Couple more. Sorry, I've been thinking a lot about this one today. So I know there's a lot of rules, and particularly the ones that I'm the most concerned about are the ones related to COVID-19. How are those rules going to be enforced as far as making sure people stay in their cars, there's no exchanging of gifts, etc.?
So one of the things that has gone on is that the organizing committee has put those rules out in advance. And so those folks registering have the opportunity via social media to know that those rules are going to be in place. The group has to provide volunteers to help with the enforcement of that. Frankly, Councilmember Bruflot, I don't know that we will go there with the intent of writing tickets and enforcement, but I do know that the rules have been put out there. People who want to be the passersby, the well-wishers, will be given a list of the rules as they enter the parade zone, and so they'll be well aware of what those rules are. And I think, frankly, we'll do our best to help ensure that people follow them. It is some of the rule set and the guidance that's provided, and I think everyone involved wants to provide for not only a fun event, celebratory event, but a safe event as well. I think that, as an example, with some of the groups that may be more at risk, this is one of the ways that those groups may be able to participate in relative close proximity to their graduate without being in touch with them, so to speak. And so I think there's a lot of want to ensure that grandpas and grandmas from everywhere can participate and drive by and wave or have a sign stuck on their car or whatever it is.
Sure. Couple more things. Where is the $500 coming from for the police labor as indicated?
So those are items we budget for a certain number of events each year. And so that would come directly out of police department budget for employees. As you are longer on the council, you'll see that we assign a fiscal impact to any of these events, whether it's the 4th of July parade, St. Patrick's Day parade. You pick the event like this, we assign an estimated cost to it. And so this is something that we do try and budget for. I will mention that there have been other parades so far this year that, well, let me rephrase that. We have other parades that would regularly occur on a yearly basis that have not occurred or have already been canceled based on the more traditional style of parade. So again, this is a planned reverse parade.
Sure. And just to let people know, I reached out to some families who had graduating seniors just to kind of get some feedback on this. And a few people are saying that some of the students have already opted not to participate, or they think it's a little bit weird, and some of the parents think it's well-intentioned but unnecessary. I guess that's the feedback that I have personally received, and I will look forward to hearing from other council members if they've received or heard anything on this. So that is all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Brad?
Yeah, I do have a question related to the parade route, particularly related to the subdivision there. I mean, I don't know the actual name of it. I know it's the Nehemiah subdivision. And is there going to be like a public safety officer or something? There's only one way in and out of that subdivision. And for that to be shut down for an hour, A, are the residents being made aware of it? And B, if someone does want to leave, is there going to perhaps like be a public safety officer or someone to just hold up the parade briefly so someone can get out? What's the plan for that?
Mr. Mayor, let me try and answer that one as well. I think we see two potential paths there, and you've articulated one where we would help someone who wants to get in and out of that subdivision get in and out through public safety. We do not have a policy or a process that sends a specific notice to everyone that might be in an affected area. We really rely on the council meeting and your public discussion and the agenda of this to be part of the notice, whether it's the 4th of July parade or St. Patrick's Day parade, or you pick it. I will tell you that based on the numbers so far, if we only have 50 participants, the end point or the termination point is likely to come before the intersection to that subdivision. The name of that roadway escapes me right now. I'm sorry about that, but with only 50, we don't need that entire very, very long stretch. If I could provide one other piece of information, one of the reasons that this area was pushed by me, by this office, was that it is not abutting a lot of residential properties. So the noise is probably not as bothersome, and we might have some people that are concerned out there about, well, an hour-long parade in front of my house, if I don't want to participate, or people are avoiding COVID, or reasons, lots of different things have changed over the last few months. But this is an area where there's lots of public property adjacent to it, not many houses, and so it seems easily utilized for this kind of purpose.
Okay. Yeah, and that's really pretty much, I just want to make sure they had an accessibility in and out of it. So, and don't feel bad about remembering the road name. I know 3 people who live there and I can't remember what the name of the road is. So.
I know how to get there from here, so I'm covered that way.
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, Ed?
And there might have been something in this and I didn't see it, Todd, but why couldn't they just make a circle in the high school parking lot?
Oh, yeah, because, yeah. And so, Ed, that was one of the ideas that was discussed heavily. And so, had I had my druthers, that would have been an option that was higher on the acceptance list by all the parties involved, but it was not. And so again, my goal is to try and help people do what they want to do if it's within the rules and the law. And so this is one of the ways that I think we're able to do this in a relatively safe fashion.
I'm not against it. I was just curious of why, because there's a lot of parking lots up there.
Yeah. Again, it was one of the items that was discussed. I don't want to speak for the school district, but if you go on the Minnesota Department of Education's website and their recommendations relative to these things, I think the school preferred not to be involved at this level in this kind of event after the effort and time and energy that they put into the virtual graduations.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Shannon?
Thank you. I am wondering what the St. Peter Police Department's role is in the fireworks display in Kasota on Friday, which is relevant in that it's the same organizers doing both events.
The short answer is none.
Okay. I guess I A lot of my questions have already been answered based on previous council members' questions. My biggest concern is how are the students going to be dropped off and picked up? And is this an opportunity for all these students to take selfies together and put their arms around each other and spread lots of germs and bring them home to their families?
So hopefully it was clear, but maybe it was not clear within the document itself. This is not a parade where high school seniors dropped off next to a cone and they stand on the boulevard and wave at people. They are required to be in vehicles with at least one parent. And so they will also be in vehicles.
Okay, that was not clear to me. The way I was reading it, I thought maybe that had to do with the drop-off process. So they'll be in vehicles. The people driving by will also be in vehicles.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. That's the plan.
That increases my level of comfort with this event significantly. So thank you for answering that question. I have no further questions, Mr. Mayor.
Shannon, I know you don't have your, and I'm really not going to ask a question, but I know you don't have your Gustavus uniform on, but Sunday, cutting across on 7th Street, across College Avenue, there was a group of 8, obviously Gustavus people going with their gowns on going to graduation, and they were all right next to each other and arm in arm going up the hill. So I don't know if Gustavus is addressing any of this with their
Gustavus. Yeah, that was not a Gustavus event. That was just Gustavus students doing something, but that was not a sanctioned by the college. The college is doing the 30th is the date that's been set for commencement, and they're doing a remote virtual type
but they
of
were
event.
my question is, and maybe Todd, you can address this with the president. My question is, they were on campus, they were all walking, right next to each other, arm in arm, basically. And do they regulate that? Some of these questions that have been asked about how are we regulating this? How does anybody regulate any of this? So that's my question on that. Carrie, do you have any questions?
I guess just more comments. I've been really privy to a lot of this information ahead of time because a committee member reached out to me quite a few times, and I asked Todd lots of questions over the last few weeks. And so I appreciate Todd's work on this. I think there's broad community support. If you've checked their Facebook page, they've got hundreds of people. They've asked the St. Peter Legion to help with enforcement of these guidelines, and I do believe that the Legion takes these guidelines really seriously. They sort of model this behavior in the community. Enforcement is really, really tricky. This is the case in businesses, community events all over the place. So I understand how that can be difficult. I think any large event comes with a lot of unpredictability, but I feel like the guidelines that are put in place, especially with the enclosed vehicles, the original plan was to have the students outside the cars, and the cars would drive by and they'd try to space out the students. I was not comfortable with that. I'm much more comfortable with the students being in their vehicles, and so I appreciate that that was built into the guidelines. I've read the Minnesota Department of Education guidelines. I feel like what we put together here follows that. The only thing I would recommend adding, and I think I mentioned this to you, Todd, I know that we're really discouraging any passing out of cards or flyers or whatever types of items you could possibly pass. But could we also ask that the committee just take care of any type of trash that might be left behind, even if it is minimal? Just do a check of the entire route to clean up.
Yes, ma'am, I believe that can be accomplished. That is something that we did have discussion on. However, I did not put it in the bullet points. Frankly, I plan to be up there as well, watching, helping, volunteering, make that go. So I will help ensure that we have volunteers that are capable and willing to do that.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I think this was a good policy that was written up, and I know that the committee and the city has put a lot of work into this. Again, there's broad community support. I think something like this does come with risk, but I am in favor of voting for this parade permit. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd, follow up with Carrie's. I know after 4th of July and some of these other bigger parades, we have our sweeper go through. Are we planning on doing that?
No, sir, I was not planning on doing that because frankly, I thought the amount of garbage would be very, very incidental since no one's supposed to be passing things back and forth. No one hopefully will be throwing candy at each other at car windows and those types of things. So, but it is possible that if there is a substantial mess, certainly this is on a Thursday evening, I would then ask Pete's crew to come through if possible on Friday if that is what's needed to ensure a clean roadway there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was everybody. I don't have any problem with the parade thing. With some of the points that were made, I don't see the need either. But I'm not young anymore, and I'm not sure how all of this works. So, but I don't see the need. The thing that I have somewhat of a problem with is, and it's being held over in Kasota, is the money that's being spent on a fireworks display that lasts 40, 45 minutes. Not much of a lasting effect, I wouldn't think, for some of these students. I thought that maybe in conjunction with, or whatever the case may be, how about class of 2020? Why don't you make a donation to the food shelf in your name? How about putting up a park bench with the class of 2020 COVID-19 class or something like that? It's a lot more lasting, and it's not that we can't see fireworks again somewhere, but that's the part of it I don't understand. Spending that kind of money when there's a lot of hungry people out there that you hear about, and they could really maybe have an impact and do a lot of good. So that's once again my little soapbox. The resolution authorizing the class of 2020 parade appears on pages 34 and 35. Is there a motion for approval?
Carrie Johnson, so moves.
May I ask a question? Are we approving the motion?
The what? I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Does the motion include that amendment that Carrie had suggested for the cleanup?
No, it does not. Carrie, did you want to amend your motion?
No, I think after we talked about it, there's probably very minimal trash collection, and it sounds like Todd and his crew will be on it. So I'll continue to move that motion. Okay,
so we have a motion from Carrie. Is there a second?
Steve Grimes, Mr. Mayor, I'll second that.
All right, Carrie 1, Steve 2. Now, is there any other questions? Shannon, did you have anything else follow up after that?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No further questions.
Okay, anybody else? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the snow ice removal policy and fee establishment. Pete and Todd.
Mayor Zeman and City Council, last week we talked about the snow removal and ice control policy at workshop. I just want to touch on a few things here for you and then open myself up for questions. Really, what we're looking for is every now and then we try to bring this back to let the council know what we're doing, kind of put it in layman's terms on how we're removing snow and addressing the concerns of our citizens. You know, our goals are really our guiding principles here. And It's really about how we do things and why we do things. We're trying to set expectations for our staff and our crew so that we're able to communicate effectively with the public. It also gives you guys a little bit of background on what's happening behind the scenes as we move forward with snow removal. We always try to do it in the spring or summer, never during the heat of, maybe that's a bad term, or the cold of winter. But we try to do things so that you guys have a chance to digest if we're doing things that are meeting the expectations. One of our goals here you'll see this year is addressing the central business district and developing a policy that will assist business owners who have no options or have very few options with options for snow removal. Private property snow removal, they do not have to use our services. They can certainly pile the snow up on their property and haul it away with private contractors. That's up to them. We are merely an option, but I think we're a pretty good option. And really it's about the service that we can provide to the business district. We do tailor a lot of our activities to getting people out and about, and then working with our central business district to make sure that people have access to them. I don't know if you guys have any questions. The policy is on page 38 through 43. Kind of talks about a variety of different things. It talks about sidewalks. It talks about snow removal, snow hauling, damage to property. And I guess I'm available for questions, and I'm asking that you adopt both policies one by one, I'm sure. Page 44, the resolution asks that you adopt the policy, and on 45, it sets the fee for downtown snow removal.
All right. We will go, and you can ask questions on both as we go around. Emily, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't have any questions. Todd, I was curious, would you be willing to share, kind of like you did last week at the workshop, just why the city of St. Peter does not call the snow emergencies? I think that was valuable information, and just in case anyone else is listening.
So I think we face a couple of challenges, certainly when we call snow emergencies that may be different than other communities, but certainly are similar to others as well. The reality, at least from my perspective, when we call a snow emergency, is that it imposes timelines and fines and fees and towing responsibilities in areas where, frankly, we do not have the capacity to meet the requirements. We rely on private companies to provide for towing and for the impounding of vehicles and the security of those vehicles. And really, we don't have enough tow trucks or enough impound space within our community to meet all those needs. So because of that, our focus becomes slightly different. And so what we try and do to encourage people to comply is provide for education. But frankly, what happens, the reality is what some might call natural consequences. In a heavy snow, if you don't move your vehicle off the roadway, you get a big pile of snow next to your car. And it probably is greater incentive for you to spend the hour or two or more shoveling your vehicle out to avoid that in the future than it is paying some $50 fine and a towing cost. For some of your residents, the money comes easy, but the 2 hours of shoveling is hard. And so maybe that's as much of an incentive as anything to help ensure that people are compliant. The other thing that I think I mentioned at the workshop is that no matter what we do, it seems that we still have that same 30 or 40 people / cars, whether we call an emergency or don't call an emergency, whether we tow or we write a ticket or whatever happens, they just don't pay attention, don't care to help themselves or their neighbors out relative to the removal of snow. And so our goal is to try and find a very efficient way to do it. In this instance, frankly, when vehicles are on the street, it causes struggle at times for Pete's crew, and certainly for heavier, more weighty snow, that's the case. But this is a little bit of a balancing act between Pete's crew and snow removal and enforcement, towing, impounding. I hope that's what you were hoping that I would cover.
Yes, Todd, thank you. I think that's really helpful to hear and for our citizens to hear, because I've had a couple of citizens wonder why we don't enforce snow emergencies very much. So thank you. That's very helpful. And I have no further questions, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor, though, if I could add one other thing to that, I think if I could just provide for clarification, I think the enforcement that we do is fine when we call a snow emergency, but Pete's crew works really hard to plow us out of a snow emergency to help make it so that we don't need to call a snow emergency. And I think that's a value as well.
Thank you for that clarification, Todd.
All right, let's see, Brad.
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right, Ed.
I have no questions.
All right, Shannon.
I have just one question, which I'm sure is a quick one, about curbs when they're damaged. It says they're to be replaced immediately. I assume that means probably in the spring, not in January.
Correct.
Thanks. Do you have a lot of curbs that get damaged, or is that pretty infrequent? Yeah.
No, there's a few. And then we also provide a service to homeowners that we deal with contractors who replace curbs, so we can put it on our list if they so choose and assess it.
Yeah, super. Thank you very much.
Okay, Carrie.
This policy is passed. How do you connect with business owners to share the policy changes?
We will go door to door with the downtown district and talk to the customers that have the potential to bring snow to us, and really educate them on what's going on out there. Otherwise, what we'll do is put it on the web. We'll do some hot sheet advertising, so to speak. It's a very effective tool in getting our message out, and just try to be open and honest about it.
It might be
You may
important.
not have this. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it might be important or helpful to note that the chamber does send our hot sheet to all of its members. So it resends on Wednesday afternoon sometime after the hot sheet goes out to all of its members.
That is helpful to know. This is really off topic, but do you ever analyze clicks, or, I mean, what is the subscription, a number of subscriptions you have to the hot sheet? Do you know that number?
So Barbara may be able to answer that question. We do measure clicks on our website, but I believe the vast majority of people that see it through subscription or just letting us know. Of course, there's no charge for that. They just got to let us know that they want it. So Barbara might know the answer, but it is in the hundreds.
I would say about 500, and there is a portion of them, like the chamber, who then distributed to a great number of other people.
So our business community is really seeing this information. So you said that you'd also, pay a visit and share the policy, especially with the 17 businesses you identified that may be interested in the snow removal.
Right.
You might not know this off the top of your head, but do you think our pricing is comparable to a private snow removal company?
That I do not know. What I do know is that's what it cost us to do this on a pretty efficient manner. So if somebody can do it cheaper, that's certainly a good option for business owners. We're not trying to take business away. We're just trying to offer a solution. So if somebody can get it done any better than what we can do, that's great.
So Mr. Mayor, if I can, to piggyback on that, Pete has said that in a very, very diplomatic way. Let me be a little bit less diplomatic. Part of the reason that we have 17 in our heads is because we believe at least a portion of those are folks that are dumping snow on your right of way anyway. And they're dumping snow on your right of way for maybe a number of different reasons, many of which we may not know or exactly understand because we're not in their shoes. But we want to provide an option for them to have that removed appropriately, rather than, frankly, an enforcement action against them for putting snow in the public right of way.
So that's another good reason to go door to door and talk through this policy with those businesses.
This policy, the other provisions of this policy are not what I would consider a substantial departure from what your current policy is. It's a maybe handier collection, a reiteration of what those rules and policies have been. Really, the only substantive change here is that not snow removal from private property, but snow being allowed to be put on the right of way within specified areas that then Pete's team would haul away for the price that's listed as a part of the formula on the second resolution.
All right, thank you for answering my questions. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. Todd, you said the chamber forwards to all their members. I've been a member of the chamber for years and I've never gotten a forward on that.
I am disappointed by that because the chamber executive has told me many times that they forward to all of their members, Mr. Mayor. So I'll clarify that with him. I was going up.
Never have received one from them. Get them from Barb, but I never through the hot sheet, but I never.
Maybe they've called you out because they know that you're getting it through Barb. I don't know, but I will visit with Ed about that. He's indicated that they.
That could be the case, but I don't know if there's anybody else that's not getting them, and it's not that I can't find it, but anyway. Let's see who we got left. Steve.
I just have one question. A lot of my questions were answered last week at our workshop, Pete, but I have one other one, and I don't know if this is related, but you know, the policy or the ordinances that the city has relative to the construction and the design of driveway aprons. Is there a reason? I mean, is the ordinance that designed that way for the aprons due to the plow hitting aprons or the curves, or are they not even related?
They are related, Steve. And what we try to do, you used to see a lot of radii curbs or, 10 to 15 foot radius curbs, big swings in there. When our plows hit those, they're going to break something, whether it's the concrete or the plow. And now, we have the 3 foot taper on most driveways. On handicapped accessible driveways, there's a 10 foot radii. And our plows can usually jump up on top of that without doing too much damage. Saving a lot of costs for the city.
Okay, thanks. I've just often wondered that. So I was thinking that possibly they were interrelated. So thanks, Pete, for that. Yep. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Pete, on page 42, and I brought this up during our workshop. Second paragraph, second to the last line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Intention to log all inquiries instead of complaints, please.
Okay, I changed the top. I must have missed a complaint in there somewhere.
Yeah, all the other ones were changed.
Okay.
All right.
I'll find it in here. I still can't find it, but we'll get her done.
But yeah, it's on page 42, section I.
Okay.
Last paragraph.
Okay.
All right, thank you. The resolution approving the upgraded snow removal and ice control policy appears on page 44. Is there a motion for approval?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
Okay, Ed 1, Shannon 2. Any other questions? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Now we have the resolution modifying the municipal fee schedule for the hauling of snow from private lots on page 40. That resolution appears on page 45. Is there a motion for approval?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Emily will second.
Okay, I heard Ed 1, Emily 2. Any other questions? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the used bucket truck purchase. Pete.
Mayor, members, though, before Pete goes, if I could, I just want to talk about process for a second before I let Pete go. This is something that by your rules could be on the consent agenda, but one of the reasons I put it on your regular or action item agenda is because it's a slight deviation from our plan, but it does save you money, so that's good. So anyway, that's one of the reasons it's on this list, because of the maybe more than slight deviation from plan. So Pete, I'll let you explain why this might be a good thing.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. Mayor Zeman and City Council, as Todd had mentioned, this was a budgeted item. We had originally budgeted $27,000 for a top kick truck, which is basically a mid-sized truck with a box on it. Our intent was to pull a chipper behind that. We could work in 2 separate crews, and then we'd also purchase an additional bucket truck. We had anticipated spending about $74,000 with those 2 units. Our mechanic and our forester got together, talked about our operation, where we're going with EAB and how we're trimming trees and how we're working boulevards. And they decided to stay with a single unit because that was basically available to us at a very reasonable price. They found a 2010 Ford 750 bucket truck from Specialty Trucks and Equipment out of Marshalltown, Iowa. That's got a 60-foot boom. As you guys are aware, we've got a 1993 Ford truck with a 50-foot boom right now. And so as our trees are actually growing to a height now where we need additional height, this was a really good fit for us. The cost that we're looking at is roughly $59,500. The savings would be about $14,500. We get a little better bucket truck. And then what we would do is we would salvage our existing extra box that we have that fits inside one of our dump trucks now, and we would just retain that. We use it about 2 to 3 times a year currently. We didn't think it was going to be worth using that unit and taking another truck out of service, but we feel for the options that we have here, that's the best solution. We've researched quite a few different models. I think we're very fortunate to come up with the unit that we did find down there. Our mechanic has traveled to Marshalltown, Iowa, and has looked at the unit, tried out the hydraulics and the costs that are associated with that. As you guys know, when we've talked previously, the hydraulics were the issue for the existing unit. Just age has taken its toll on where we're at. We did buy that thing used quite a few years ago. The funding would come out of the environmental services budget. This would be a cash purchase. And then what we were proposing to do is to take the existing unit and put it on the min bid system and dispose of it through either auction or sealed bids. I'm available to answer any questions that you may have. There's a resolution on page 48.
All right. Thank you, Pete. Brad, questions?
I have a comment and a question. First, the comment, it's more of a compliment. Good job on finding a way to save the city money, both on this purchase, combining 2 purchases into 1 lower cost option, as well as reusing the box from the current one. The only question I have is, would this be available, say, in November of each year for loaning out for residential Christmas light hanging, or?
Yeah, it's roughly $5,000 per house. We could do anything.
Okay, I might pass.
Good answer.
Don't even get that started now. Don't even get that started on me.
Might get
that's all I
tomorrow.
have. But good,
Well,
good work on the cost savings, Pete. Very good work on that. So.
Brad, if you ask real nice, I know Pete lives close to you. You can have him come over and you can stand on his shoulders, and that would might take care of all your problems. Ed, questions?
I have no questions. Them guys know what they're doing when they're finding stuff. So,
All right. Shannon?
No questions, but thanks for your creative thinking, Pete. Seems like a good buy.
Carrie?
No questions, thank you.
Steve?
No questions, Mr. Mayor.
Emily?
I have no questions, thank you.
All right. I have a question for you, Pete, or a couple of them here. Is there any warranty on this? I couldn't see it in here because it's of its age, or
Yeah, usually there's like a 2-week warranty or a 3-week warranty when it comes out of there if something major goes wrong right away. I'm not aware of anything that usually comes with a used vehicle like that.
Right. Okay. I was just curious if they had because of the type of business they're in with doing that.
Yep.
Do we have a two-parter here? Is there any trade-in value for this when we bought this other one or buying this other one?
Yeah, they didn't want to handle something that old, although you do have quite a few tree trimmers that would look for a unit like this. And so our goal would be to contact the list that we have that work in the city of St. Peter and let them know that our unit would be available. We anticipate that this has a value of $8,000 to $10,000.
Okay, that was my next question. What do we consider the value on? And I thought, well, do we come and let somebody make an offer, or do we tell them that beforehand? So, so you've already told them $8,000 to $10,000, so that takes care of that part. All right. The resolution for authorizing the purchase of a used 2010 Ford F-750 bucket truck appears on page 48. Is there a motion for approval?
Steve Grimes, Mr. Mayor, make that motion.
Noel will
Handle
second.
All right, I got Steve 1 and Shannon 2. Any questions now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports. Todd, I'm going to forward going back to Mr. Logger when he was here during our visitor section. I'm going to forward it's not many, just a couple of emails, 3 of them I think it is, that I had with him over the last few days to you, and then you can redact whatever you want and send them out to the rest of the council if you would.
I will. Thank you.
All right. And then the only other thing I have, and it kind of comes back to, well, it does come back to the graduation thing. I had asked last week if anybody knew what schools did during World War II. Well, we have somebody in our family, my father-in-law, who is 96, lives in Stillwater, was a 1942 graduate of Stillwater High School, and we were talking about sacrifices. And he said, yes, they did. They had a ceremony. But he said it was very subdued and very solemn because most of the boys, who were all just 18, most of them had already gotten their draft notices to head off to boot camp, and he did a few days later and ended up at Midway Island during World War II. So, if we want to talk about sacrifices and having an impact, I guess there's different ways of doing it. That's all I have, Todd.
Mr. Mayor, I'll start with my reports, and the first one that I have on my list is a COVID-19 impact report. And as members may recall, I've typically gone through a pretty long list without taking a breath of all the things that have been impacted. Tonight, let me change that just a little bit. With the latest governor's direction and orders, as you know, there are changing business sectors that are starting to open up. And so one of those business sectors is the hospitality industry, restaurants and bars. And so I wanted to give you just a very brief update about what your current rules are and discussion that your city attorney and I, your police chief and community development director have had, and that I've had then subsequently with the licensing agency in the county for food service industries. Jesse Harmon does that work. So you have previously had in place rules and ordinances relative to liquor sales outside licensed establishments on private property and the use of right-of-way. So let me give you an example of a couple of those. So one of those, a great illustration, is River Rock Coffee, who has a few chairs and tables out on their sidewalk. And so we have already pre-developed rules for this and ordinance for this. So there's a process for them to be able to continue to do that. And you have a number of businesses that have permits, a right-of-way use or a public use, a sidewalk use permit already in place. Your rules say that those are for 5 years at a time, And they have to provide insurance, just like we talked about with the parade, $1.5 million of insurance and this insurance certificate. And that, again, there's a process for that to occur. And so you have a half a dozen businesses or so that already have that in place. You have some new folks that, because of the changes, because of COVID-19, are interested in pursuing that. Under the emergency powers that you give me, I have the opportunity to waive fees or provide within certain rules slight modifications following your policies. And so this is an area where from a city administrator's chair, in concurrence with your city attorney and others, that we can provide for a short operational window for restaurants that don't serve alcohol to be able to utilize that ordinance, and we would have a zero fee and provide that opportunity through the end of August. Now that could be extended, but at least through the end of August, or technically 30 days past the end of the emergency declaration, whether that emergency declaration is the state, the governor's declaration, or whether it's your declaration. And so it provides opportunity for those restaurants to be able to do that and other businesses. As a part of the liquor sales, there are some additional rules that we have had in place previously as well. So a great example of that might be a few years ago where Patrick's used to have on the 3rd Street side of their business, a small fenced-in area that they would provide for food and beverage service. And so those rules are already in place. The reason that I illustrate that is because very, very few cities have rules in place for the public use of right-of-way. So as these changes are occurring at the state level and businesses are allowed to open, they are faced with the challenge of developing uniform rules surrounding that, where in most instances we have those rules. So that's one portion of this discussion. The second portion of the discussion relates to utilization of businesses, and let me use an example of El Agave. El Agave has expressed interest in potentially opening up for the sale of food and alcohol, and they can do that on their private property under the current state rules and your rules, as long as it is contiguous to their facility and it's on private property and it's fenced in a manner or way. And so that's on private property. So that's already allowed as a part of the rules that you have in place and the state rules. The only difference is that under the authority that you give me, they would be allowed to do that temporarily without a state approval process. In the past, there'd have to be a state approval process, but since that's essentially being waived by the state, as best our understanding is of that situation, they could do that temporarily. And with both of these, we can provide for an administrative approval, provided they meet the guidelines in the statute, or I'm sorry, the ordinance that you already have in place. So I wanted, and there's no cost for that. That's a zero cost as well. So we have those things already in place where other communities may not have that in place. So I wanted to let you know. And if you want more information about that, give me a call, or I'll be happy to send you the document that is the memo that's exchanged amongst staff that I hope clearly articulates how this all fits together in the process. So that said, council member impact is that if you have a business that contacts you that wants to use the right of way, please have them contact us and we can work them through the process very quickly and very efficiently. If you have an establishment that sells alcohol that wants to sell on the right of way on the sidewalk, as an example, please send them our way. We can make that happen very quickly. The same is true if they want to expand. As I mentioned, El Agave is a great example of that. If they want to expand in an area now that's on their private property. You have a number of businesses that own a parking lot that it could expand readily, and you have a number of other businesses that already have patios that have the opportunity to provide that kind of service. So I think we're in good stead relative to assisting those businesses. One thing that I will mention is that I think, unfortunately, during the governor's last or second to last press conference where he outlined some of this, he talked about parking areas. We just don't see a way on any of the streets that we have now to safely cordon off parking stalls for this kind of use on a temporary or infrequent basis. It just doesn't seem logical to me to provide that opportunity on parking stalls on 3rd Street where cars drive by at 25 or 30 miles per hour and allow for alcohol consumption in that location when there are other opportunities on the sidewalk area that would provide some buffer between people who are imbibing, eating food, and cars that are passing by. So I wanted you to be aware of that. This does not include utilization of public streets. It would include sidewalks, It would also include private parking lots. So that's the update that I have for you on that one. If you have other questions, one other item that the city attorney asked that I mentioned, because we had a very good discussion about when the council calls an emergency, what does that mean? And we chuckled a little bit. What superpowers does the city administrator gain in that? And so he asked that I articulate at least one or two of the other things that I've done utilizing those emergency powers. So one of those, as you discussed previously, is the waiver of late fees on utilities, as you discussed. And so, as you may recall, that was a discussion as a part of the cold weather rule. So I have followed your direction and lead and utilized the authority that you give me to provide for no fees to a certain period for that. And frankly, that's the only other one. We have not waived any of the bidding requirements. We have not waived any of the purchasing requirements. We have done none of those kind of things. So Jim asked that I articulate that to you so that you were aware of how these things kind of fit together. So Mr. Mayor, if anybody has questions on that, I'd be happy to answer that before I go on to my other three reports that I have.
Yeah, tonight let's that one, the first one's kind of a big one. So why don't we discuss that one first, and we'll go around for questions. Ed?
I have none. I've already talked to Todd a little bit about it, so.
Okay. All right. Shannon?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Carrie?
So just to clarify, or maybe you can reiterate this, if a business requests a sidewalk permit and they want to sell liquor, it has to be, that area has to be fenced in, and what type of fence?
It would have to be, there would have to be some physical delineation between the area where consumption can occur and the sidewalk. And so let me talk about that in two distinct areas, one of which is the rationale and your current ordinance relative to that sidewalk requires that there's at least 36 inches of horizontal clearance from the curb to where that physical barrier is. That's to allow people to walk by, or a wheelchair to get through, or stroller to get through. The physical barrier is to provide, frankly, I'm not worried about somebody purchasing a beer and somebody riding by on their bike and they hand it off to someone on the bike. I don't know that we can solve all of that, but it is a clear visual clue for both people utilizing the sidewalk and those that are utilizing the table or chairs or having a drink out there, a clear physical barrier about what the distance requirements are. And so that's one of the reasons we look for a fence or a physical barrier. So it could be as easy as balusters with ropes, or like you might see at a movie theater, the velvet hanging things would suffice, I think, in this instance on a temporary basis.
How about the yellow tape they use at crime scenes? I'm serious.
Well, so if that was hung above ground and not like Les Nessman put on the floor, then I think that would be okay, Mr. Mayor. I think that would provide what we're really looking for. We would want to ensure that it didn't disappear every night and that it came back the next day for service.
Right.
But yeah, I think that would suffice in providing that delineation.
Okay.
So
all right. Carrie,
so
okay.
Yeah, so you answered my question then about ADA accessibility. So that's 36 inches, and so I'm not exactly, I don't know the measurements of a sidewalk, but if we're thinking about the sidewalks in town, we can use that River Rock business as an example of what that might look like.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate example. And you do have some sidewalks that are 10 to 12 feet and some that are about 16 feet on some of the side streets. So there's quite a bit of space there. Certainly not as much as inside one of those establishments, but there's quite a little bit of space that would be available to folks. I expect you will have a few utilize this. Certainly not everyone will utilize this. They are required to have the insurance, as I said previously, and so there's some additional cost to getting set up in that way.
And then my last question is, have any businesses requested any other creative measures in order to be able to expand their ability to serve food or drink outside, like closing down streets or things like that? I mean, I'm just wondering if there's been interest expressed from businesses in that regard.
So let me couch this appropriately. In talking with the chamber and talking with some of the folks in the business community as sidebar discussions as a part of your Friday business meetings, there has been that idea floated. I I think the challenge with that is that that may be doable in short temporary spurts, maybe for a Friday night and or Saturday morning where a block of your roadway could be closed off and make that happen. But under the state rules, we would require, and they would require, that that entire area be fenced off, much like you might see with Oktoberfest or other things. So I don't know that that works very well. And certainly I would be concerned, as would some of the neighboring businesses be concerned, about parking and access. And do they want to forego that for 2 or 3 or 4 or however many weeks? Whereas maybe for a weekend you're interested in that, but over a shorter period of time. If a request of that type came forward from the business community, my goal would be to encourage them to work together, maybe through the chamber, to establish more of an event or festival type of activity. But now remember, we're still in time of COVID. So social distancing and all those things would have to be a factor in that, much like we talked about with the parade issue. And so I don't know that those two really mesh together very well right now, whereas this utilization of sidewalk or private parking areas, I think, have the opportunity to bear better fruit for some of our local businesses.
All right, thank you.
All right, let's see. Steve. Steve? Okay, we'll go back to Steve. Emily, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no questions.
All right, Brad?
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right. Steve, are you back?
Yep, sorry, I had my mute button on there. Todd, I appreciate you addressing the 36-inch clearance on the sidewalk. I do remember when Patrick's had that. The problem I had when I tried to get through there is people always park their bikes in that 36-inch clearance. So I never got through there anyway, unless I got angry, then I pushed their bikes off into the road. But anyway, that was an issue that I dealt with relative to the 36-inch clearance. So just a point, that's all I wanted to mention. But other than that, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Todd, I'm going to ask for a clarification. When you talked about sidewalk widths, you said 12 to, there's some to 16 feet?
I believe that is correct on one of the side streets that we have, Mr. Mayor. I can't
Really?
conjure up what street it was, but we do have some that are substantial.
Okay.
Not all of them are, but substantial.
Yeah, I suppose down by, I can see where there might be one now that I think about it, by the laundry and maybe through there somewhere. But anyway, okay.
Yeah, that's correct. And in front of Jake's Pizza has an example, or Taco John's in that area.
All right, it just seems really big. Anyway, I have questions. Are they still requiring restaurants and bars and this type, or people at restaurants, are they still requiring reservations?
That's my understanding currently, Mr. Mayor, but I do anticipate that over the next time frame, whatever time frame you pick, if it's more than a week, that there's the potential for that to change.
Yeah, and that's one of the things like Mr. Lager brought up earlier. I don't need a reservation to go to Hy-Vee or to Menards or any of these places, and I can stay in there for as long as I want. But you're going to put another burden on these businesses to have somebody take reservations. This is beyond me. You mentioned sidewalks and you referred to right-of-ways. What about alleys? I'm talking specifically Flame Bar.
So I can't speak to their issues specifically. It's my understanding that they do have some small patio area. However, in that area, as you may be aware, those alleys are owned in share by the abutting property owners. So we would encourage that it cannot be blocked. And let me give you one additional example. We would not allow, because it's not contiguous, and so the state law has not been changed that I'm aware of in this instance, we would not allow them or the Legion to use someone else's parking lot across that public space. So they couldn't establish.
I'm understanding that. I'm talking specifically the alley.
Yeah, in the alley in that instance, we would discourage that. They would need approval of all the other folks in the original or the amended plat, is my understanding of how our ordinance and the court ruling from the late 1800s works relative to utilization of that property.
Okay. I have one more question. All of this is outdoors. What about restrooms?
We do not have a requirement for restrooms currently, but my understanding is from the guidance by the state. Forgive me, I don't remember if this was from DEED or from the Minnesota Department of Health, but that restaurants would be allowed to allow their patrons that are utilizing their outside space to go in and utilize an indoor restroom. I do think that you might have some that might put a hand washing station or something out like that out in one of these locations. But that I think most businesses probably haven't gotten that far in their thinking quite yet.
Well, I disagree.
Okay.
But anyway, okay, so you want to go on to your next two topics? I think will probably be shorter, and we can ask questions after that, and last go around were for comments. So if you would go to 2020 elections, please.
Yes, if I can, voters that are concerned about casting their ballots in person on election day have other options. So we want to provide and make sure that people have the opportunity to know about absentee voting. It's a secure way to cast your ballot when you can't go to the polling place. And so, but before your ballot can be emailed to you, you need to apply. And so we'll include some information in upcoming hot sheets on our Facebook page and other things with that email address for people to apply to be able to do that. You'll have to provide some identifying information. And once you get that, election officials at Nicollet County will verify that information. And when the time comes, they will mail a ballot to you. The ballot can be completed and witnessed and sent back to be counted and without having even to leave your house. And so this is an option that's been available for a while, so this isn't exactly new, but we want to make sure that people understand that it's available. Absentee ballot applications for both the primary election in August and the general election in November are being accepted now. So it's a great time to get out there. And if you want to avoid what we anticipate might be lines because of the additional challenges related to COVID and during this year's elections, we'd encourage you to check out that option. Again, we'll have some additional information in Hot Sheet and on Facebook.
Okay, and closed session.
It's closed session, Mr. Mayor. As you know, council members, there is state statute that requires a report after you had a closed session. At your last closed session, your last council meeting, there was a closed session discussing the ponds that you've had for sale for a while. The report is that you had received an offer which you have counter offered at this time. And so that's really all under the law that we need to report. And so there's a negotiation going on. I don't know, Jim, if there's anything else that you feel we should add, but I think that covers it, I hope.
No, I agree. I think that's the important part is that there was an offer made, we counter offered.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, I have one other one that I would love to mention and just show on my camera, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
This will be a short one. I do want to mention, again, with the city's acceptance of the Veterans Memorial at the corner of Highway 169/Old Minnesota and College Avenue, we have now accepted the responsibility relative to people being able to place names on that memorial. And so I do want to show this, or at least a portion of this, very quickly. This is some of the documentation now that people can find on our website. And so we're really ready to go and working with folks to be able to establish or complete the process to add additional names to that service wall. This happens to be the service wall application. So if you want to see more, there's certainly more on our website, and we'll provide some information on Facebook and the hot sheet in the near future, but wanted you to follow up with you on that is going and operational currently. So Mr. Mayor, that's all I have for you and the council tonight.
All right. We will go around for the last time, and if you have any questions, and also if you have anything you'd like to share or add with the council and the public, we will do that. And any questions on what Todd just talked about too. Shannon, we're going to start with you.
I don't have anything. Thank you very much.
All right, Carrie?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to share that I swung by the St. Peter Legion's curbside barbecue, and I felt like they just did a really good job with that, and especially in honoring service members who've died in the line of duty, and with everything that's going on with COVID-19, keeping those so the acts of remembrance small and safe, and then also having a way for the community to donate they've done a tremendous effort in making masks available to the community and having those for sale. So I thought that they did a really good job, and I just wanted to say that here tonight. Thank you.
All right. Steve.
I don't have a statement. I just got a question, and maybe relative to constitutional law, but does the president have the authority to override the Secretary of States in each individual state relative to in-vote voting as opposed to mail-in voting? Does anybody know that question or that answer?
Jim, do you want to call somebody?
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I'm confident it's by law as to what the laws are on voting. My guess is it may be state specific. One of the constitutional arguments is there's a deal between states' rights, and I'm guessing it might fall under that category.
That's what I was wondering, as a republic, that's why I was just curious, because there's so much discussion on that issue. That's why I was just curious, Jim. So, because I know the Secretary of each state is responsible for that, at least for Minnesota anyway. So, well, thanks.
Sure.
All right. Anything else, Steve?
No, that's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Emily.
Thank you. I have no questions. Just a general comment. I'll reaffirm what Todd said about that absentee voting. It's really slick, so I recommend it. We've been doing it for a couple of years here. It's a good option. So thank you for sharing that with us, Todd. No further comments.
All right, Brad.
So I didn't address this issue I didn't address the question last week, so I will address it this week. Because it was brought up again. The issue of comparing what we're dealing with now versus World War II. Number one, whoever's using that analogy, it is an incorrect analogy. The actual appropriate analogy historians are using are comparing it to the 1918 flu pandemic. Difference between what's going on now and what's happening in World War II. Right now we're dealing with a public health issue, and holding a graduation has a chance to spread the disease. During World War II, they could hold a graduation because they weren't worried about the Nazis coming and marching on the gym. That's literally the difference. So as far as why we're canceling it, we're canceling things because of a public health issue. And the World War II analogy, as I said, isn't appropriate. And all the historians who are actually reflecting on it are actually comparing it to the 1918 flu pandemic. They say it happens every 100 years. This is basically almost on clockwork. So that would be the one thing. And as we're on analogies, you talk about why is Menards open? Well, Menards is open because it falls under the category of the hardware stores, and Ace is open as well. So, and I've been into Ace quite a bit, and Ace is just as busy, if not busier. The yellow, basically the yellow candy store, that one they're using a little exception. They're using an exception. Is it appropriate? No. But at least when we're using our analogies, we need to make sure we're appropriate ones. But particularly the World War II analogy needs to stop being brought up, because this is not comparable to World War II. It's actually comparable to the 1918 flu pandemic. And when you go back, there are stories from social distancing perspective, cities that did and didn't do it, and the toll that was extracted there. So when we're using our analogies, they need to actually be appropriate to the situation that's going on here. So,
all right, Brad. Well, I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people that think differently than you do, just like with anything. The other thing you brought up Menards. Menards is able to. Here's my question to you: furniture stores could not be open. What does Menards sell? Furniture.
Menards mostly sells hardware, though. That's the biggest thing.
I'm not saying that, but they sell furniture. Anyway,
Menards
all right. Shannon, we already talked to you, right? Nope, Ed, sorry.
At this time, I have no questions or suggestions.
All right. Todd, the other thing, I guess I follow with Carrie. We also went down to the Legion on Memorial Day, and we do have their masks. And I got down there, it was about 1:45. They ran it from 11 to 1. They started a little bit early, and they said when I got there, they said they had just been swamped. So I'm glad to see the turnout on that. Todd, if you have nothing else to add, well, I guess I'm going to make another point. This vote by mail, when you say that, what they're talking about is nationally is doing a mass mailing, not just absentee. I believe that's the major difference in that. So that's absentee balloting, like you said, has been around for a long time and does work very, very well. So anybody, let's see here. I think we got everybody. We did get everybody. Todd, if you have nothing else to add, is there a motion to adjourn?
Ed will make a motion to adjourn.
Noel will second.
Ed 1, Shannon 2. All in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned.